Well, thanks, Buran, and thanks for asking me to share a few thoughts with you. I hope I'm going to be pretty challenging. We heard some scary and shocking statistics at the beginning about climate change and what it's likely to do to the planet and to our civilization. I'd like to start with an even more scary and I think scandalous fact, which is that our government has not yet begun, I say begun, to respond to the science of climate change with anything like the necessary urgency and determination. Most of my time is spent looking at UK policy, so I'm going to talk about what I know, but I could be saying much the same about practically any other government in the world. There isn't, in my view, a real world leader in this respect. These projects that we've been hearing about are inspiring, they're fascinating, but they're very special. They've all started from scratch, but the Masdar one at least has a very deep pocket indeed, and they're all new build. What on earth can we learn from these for Battersea, Bolton and Birkenhead, which is where the climate war will be won or, on current evidence, lost? We can learn a lot. From Sonoma, we heard about energy efficiency. It was interesting that all these were predominantly hot places, whereas ours, at the moment at least, is a predominantly cold place, but so even energy efficiency even more important. We heard about zero carbon infrastructure, not low carbon infrastructure, but zero carbon infrastructure. From Masdar, we heard about zero traffic and 100% renewable energy. From Mata de Sesimbra, we heard about nature, urban nature, forests, and sustainability planning. I was privileged until the middle of this year to serve on the Royal Commission on Environmental Pollution, and we did a study on the urban environment, which I would commend to you, which was published last year. And I'm afraid to say that all the evidence that we found, or practically all of it, operated precisely against all those principles that were exemplified in those case studies. We looked at the growth area of Ashford, huge development being planned, with no plans at all to put in public transport before the houses were occupied, so that we could be sure that these would be car-dependent communities going straight into the future. We saw the Thames Gateway plan with no thought at all to forests, biodiversity, nature, for bioenergy and all these other kinds of things. We saw proposals for eco-towns that were clearly nothing of the sort. What would an eco-town be on the basis of the case studies that we've seen today? An eco-town would clearly be something with zero carbon homes and with zero facilities for private motor cars, where mobility was exclusively walking, cycling, and public transport. There were absolutely no signs of any such plans. What would we see in terms of the existing housing stock? We would see the mandatory training of every builder in the country in advanced energy efficiency and microgeneration technologies, just as you don't allow people to put gas in people's homes unless they have a proper qualification. You wouldn't allow builders loose on people's homes unless they knew what zero carbon was all about, followed by a package of investment and stimulus measures that would result in really serious investment in the housing stock. And by serious, let's just have a number. If we want to do 1 million houses a year, or 1 million households a year, and if we want to spend about £10,000 per household, which is roughly what it's likely to cost to get these technologies in place, that's 10 billion a year. In the stimulus package announced in the pre-budget report, we had a cut in value-added tax which will generate undifferentiated consumption across the country that cost about 12 billion a year. I ask you, which would have been the more sustainable approach to regenerating the economy. One of the most scandalous statistics in the King report on transport, which was published some time ago, was that if people bought the most fuel-efficient class, the most fuel-efficient car in the class of car that they were buying, in other words, if they felt they had to have an SUV, they bought the most fuel-efficient SUV, then fuel consumption from the new car fleet would fall by 20 to 30%. In other words, people could still have SUVs, but the most fuel-efficient one would be 20 to 30%. I ask you, what are we thinking of when we hear the climate science and we have a policy response that is still so woefully inadequate? Thank you.